Let's see. Awesome. Well, hello.
Hello.
Welcome to Game Changers Chat. This is our third one, and I'm really excited to have with me Jeff Cherry, who I had the pleasure of meeting through the Conscious Capitalism community, and he was kind enough to bring me onto his committee, and we got to slug it out trying to get big money guys to make a commitment towards socially responsible investing. But we may get into that. But I think the more compelling thing that we want to get into is Jeff Cherry, the man.
Hi, Tevis.
Don't you love that accolade? Jeff Cherry, the man.
I don't know about all that, but I'm just happy to be here. Happy to be with you as always.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to jump in because, as you know, and some of the folks who will end up seeing this know, I've got a book coming out called The Game Changer's Guide to Radical Success. And it's just my own experience of what it really takes to pivot. And this is a time everyone's talking about game changing, about pivoting. And when I sit on my cushion and I think about people who have really done that, not just now because it's a wake up moment, but have really done it their entire lives, I think of you. So of course I did my little homework, right? You're supposed to do homework. You're supposed to actually know about people beyond what you learn over a glass of wine. You have people on your show.
Or 10 glasses of wine, whatever.
Or 10 or 20, or maybe a whiskey. It could go places, right? It's got legs, as they say. Right. So, Jeff, you have been a game changer your entire life. And I'm just curious, we'll get into what some of the pivots have been, but what do you feel like your inspiration has been? What has been your formative, wow, I can actually build a life that I identify with, I resonate with, like who taught you that audacity? Because so many people, maybe they hear it a little bit, but then they get layered on with so many shoulds, so many boxes they have to check along the way. So I'm just curious, where do you feel like you got that?
Yeah, Tevis, that's a great question, which I'm not really sure I have a great answer to. It's just sort of, I suppose it had a lot to do with my parents and my family. I always saw them, they weren't necessarily doing it on their own, but doing, growing up when I did in the 60s and watching my grandfather and, the work that he did, and my mother and my father, making their way in a world that was not kind to them.
Yeah.
And many times, and not complaining about it, just getting up and doing what had to be done. Yeah. So I think in lots of ways that's been instilled in me just from the way I grew up from the very beginning. And then I think some of it was out of necessity, trying to figure out, how I was going to sort of make my own way in the world. And then some of it was out of naivete, not knowing any better.
Right.
Just sort of, I think all of that came together. I started, my first company literally because a guy I went to high school with, who I attended bar with, asked me to design a restaurant for him.
Wow.
I already had a job. I was heading back to Manhattan. I was in DC and I was heading back to New York. I was going to work for a firm called Swanky, Hayden and Connell,
Swanky? Really swanky?
Swanky, Hayden and Connell. Yeah. architectural firm. I have an architectural degree. I'm an
I
architect.
know. Okay, that's kind of a cool thing to underscore too, because you're now a venture capitalist.
Right.
And you worked in the money world for other people, and now you're out on your own. So how does a kid who grew up where? In Baltimore?
No, in New York.
In New York. Okay. A kid who grows up in New York sees his parents. No one's putting out the welcome mat for them, right? No one's saying, "Oh, we're so glad you're here," right?
Oh.
But they teach you the stick-to-itiveness to keep going and keep going. How did you end up in architecture?
It's something I grew. I have no idea where it came from. My mom told me. She said, when you were 4 years old, I asked you, "Where'd you want to be when you grow up?" And she said, "You said a football player, a truck driver, an architect."
Well, from what I know about you, you check the football player box.
Right. Yeah.
You check the architect box. Have you ever been a truck driver, Jeff?
No, I've not really been a truck driver, no.
Well, you have something yet on your checklist to get to then.
Yeah, but no idea where it came from. But it's something that I sort of, for some reason, aspired to from early on. I mean, who knows? Was a pretty creative kid. I could always draw. I was very good, at art and that sort of stuff, but no idea where it came from. But it's something that I, from very early age, is something I wanted to do. And I think that, we always talk about nature or nurture, and I have no idea what the answer is, but I do think that there's something in me that is an integrator at core. People have said this to me, but architecture is about taking all of this information that's related, unrelated, seemingly contradictory, all of this stuff, and then looking at that through the lens of a program. Someone says, "I want a space that does this." You have all this contradictory information. You have to create something out of it.
Yeah.
In some ways, it feels like that's what I've been doing all along. So people ask, "How did you get from one to the other?" And there's an interesting story to it, which we can talk about.
Of course.
But a lot of it is about this mindset of how do you integrate things? How do you bring things together to create something new? Right. And that's what we do in business all the time. I mean, you know this as well as anybody, right? I mean, oftentimes what we're doing is taking things that seemingly don't fit together and figuring out a way to make them fit together and create something that wasn't there before. Yeah. Right. That's what architecture is about. And I think that I'm talking to my alma mater, Catholic U, about teaching a class in the business school about thinking like an architect, because that
design principles,
design principles and all of that sort of stuff. So I think that served me well. I don't know if it served me well. It certainly made my path for me, right?
Well, there can't have been a lot of kids, like that must have been the early 80s, right? There can't have been a lot of Black kids in the architecture school. Was that comfortable?
I think there were two of us. Yeah.
So what is that like?
If I remember correctly, I think that there were two of us. Yeah, look, it was, I had a discussion last week with someone about this, and I think that I've always been, as you know, I mean, I make friends easily, right?
Wait, so let me just underscore this. Everyone I have ever met who knows Jeff, calls them his best friend. It's kind of nauseating. So stop being so that, whatever that is. Yeah.
But, and I was, as we alluded to a little bit, I was a pretty good athlete. So when I first, in Queens, when we lived in Queens, we were surrounded all by Black folk. And when we moved to Long Island, I think I experienced it differently than my sisters did, because I have a different personality. And also I was, immediately in the athletic group, because I was a good football player and got, but I think that, I was assimilating. I didn't recognize some of the microaggressions that were happening, or else I was ignoring them.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I'm paying for it now in a lot
How
of ways.
so? How so?
Well, I just think that, it's like, I don't know if it's, coming home to roost or whatever you want to call it, but, I wrote an article on Medium like a week ago. I think you read it after the George Floyd thing.
Yeah.
I was talking about, getting money into, everyone's saying, how do we get more money into minority-owned businesses? And I said, well, you get more money by investing in minority-owned funds, which I'm one of.
Yeah.
And not to pat myself on the back or toot my horn, but if you look at the things that I've done over my career, and then how difficult has been for us to get this business off the ground, to raise capital.
Yeah.
If when you just read, if I send you a list of, here's all the things that this person has done, and now this person started the venture firm, you'd say, oh, well, naturally people will give this person money because there's a seemingly a pedigree of something there, and it's been next to impossible. I mean,
yeah.
It's been an uphill climb.
Right? That was so. For those of you who are watching, if you haven't seen his article on Medium, he's got a number of them. And what I loved about this particular piece, Jeff, is you said, I'm sick, I'm tired, and I'm angry. I'm sick, I'm tired, and I am angry. We're right over and over and over again. But the structure of it had such a dignity. And when you spoke about, imagine this capitalist, right, asking for funds, and you described everything that you've done. I mean, starting with having been an architect, starting with having pivoted and starting, how many companies have you successfully started at this point? 7. Okay. So a 7-time successful entrepreneur. On top of that, the number of funds that you have managed, or the amount of money that you have managed, and you also worked in the venture space for others, correct?
We worked in the hedge fund space for others, but it was a little bit of a hybrid. We were working for ourselves, but we partnered with another firm. So the end game is the same. I mean, you could go to that firm that we work with, who was a $9 billion hedge fund.
Yeah.
And they used to joke about, you've met my old partner, Rick Frazier. They used to joke about Rick and I. We would sit, they gave us office space in their office on 51st and 7th Avenue. And we'd sit in this office in the back, which was completely, closed in glass.
A closet? A glass closet?
It was a little bit bigger than the closet, but they would joke and say, people would walk by and they'd point to us like, those are the smart kids back there. We don't know what they're doing, but it's working out pretty well. So they would vouch for us, put it that way.
Yeah. Okay, so this is all over the place, and people who know me know I'm pretty goldfish-like or butterfly-like in my ability to track stuff. Okay, so here you are, this smart-ass kid, this architect. You actually work in the field. You're about to go back and go from DC to New York City to work for another firm. You bail and start a restaurant? Is that the story?
Well, it's sort of along the way.
Okay.
You're butterflying all over the place, but
okay.
But it's all I have 3 younger sisters.
Yes.
So after about my halfway through my sophomore year in college, when my sisters were getting ready for school, my dad was like, "Look, you're on your own from now on." So I put myself through school by tending bar. I was in the restaurant business for a long time, so I knew a lot about the business. I knew a lot of people in the business. So yeah, we started a restaurant. It's sort of in the middle of all that. Yeah.
In the middle of all that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big question, because somehow along that trajectory, something made you fall in love with doing what's right.
Yeah.
Right. Somewhere along all these moves, that there emerges a commitment to the notion that the production of goods and services does not have to be harmful to all but the shareholders.
Yeah.
Right. So where did that emerge from?
You know, I was having a discussion with someone else about this yesterday, I think, but I think a lot of that was, you know, it's some of that was that naivete that we talked about earlier, Tevis. It was sort of like, you know, essentially, other than being, you know, behind the bar and stuff like that, I've not really worked for anyone else. So, and I didn't go to business school, right? So I went to architecture school. You learn a whole different thing. You don't learn a lot about the business of architecture.
Yeah.
So when I started the business, I didn't know any better. I just said, you know, we're just going to try to treat people like I'd want to be treated if I were working for somebody else, right?
So you never learned that kind of command and control BS, that patriarchal, oh, you can't show them you're human, you can't.
Right. No, and maybe some of that came from, you know, I did, you know, watching my dad. My dad worked on Wall Street. You know, my dad worked for Salomon Brothers. And, you know, he was up every morning at 4 o'clock, you know, on the Long Island Railroad, but he wasn't happy about it. And a lot of it, you know, I'm sure that some of his experience probably rubbed off on me, his not so great experience in corporate America, but it wasn't sort of a direct thing, right? It was more of a, you know, by osmosis. It was more of when I started the company, and, you know, I started with a friend, and then we started hiring people we knew. So it was just sort of like, well, how would we want to be treated if we were them? You know, that's just sort of how,
golden rule. Like, this is not rocket science.
Right. You know, and years later, I had another friend of mine, a guy named Sean Mulholland, who unfortunately has since passed away. But Sean was my roommate when I was a freshman in college, and we played football together. Sean was also the commander of all special forces in Afghanistan during a Desert Storm. After Desert Storm after that. But I asked him once, and, you know, he rose from an enlisted man to a 1-star general. And I asked him once, just, you know, over beers, you know, how do you get them to do it, Sean? How do you get these kids that are, you know, 18, 19, 20 years old to do all of these, you know, not only is it a hard job, but sometimes they have to do really horrible things in the name of, you know, safety and saving each other. And I just said, he just said to me something I'll never forget. He said, I try to be the leader I always wish I had.
Yeah.
Right. Now, again, he had a much different experience, but I think that was somewhere in the back of my head all along.
Yeah. As being the leader that you would wish that you had had.
Always had, right?
So this got you pretty deep into the conscious capitalism world.
Yeah, so, you know, from an operating standpoint, we were sort of building our business with that mindset of a stakeholder mindset, right? So how do we take care of all of our stakeholders? But then, you know...
but this was like the formation of officially conscious capitalism and terms of endearment?
This was all before that, right? So for lots of different reasons, and if you want to go down this path, we can, but simply, we turned that architectural firm into more of a management consulting company over the 20 years that I ran that firm, for lots of different reasons. It had to do with how we thought about practicing architecture, had to do with how we were thinking about competition. But long story short, we had this sort of three-headed monster. It was architects, it was cultural anthropologists type people, and it was technologists. And we were trying to bring those things together to redefine environment so we could help organizations drive performance. So
you were working from the standpoint of the built environment, the social environment, and how to bring that all. That's pretty cool.
Technological environment. So all three of those. Our thought was we know that the physical environment, Churchill once said, first we create our buildings, then they create us. And he was talking about whether they want to rebuild the House of Commons as it was after the Blitzkrieg, But we know that there's more to that than just sort of the patriotism that he was displaying. That there's a group out in California called the Academy for Neuroscience and Architecture that studies the impact of the physical environment on the brain. So we know that this is true. So we were thinking about how do we create an environment that inspires or enables behavior that's aligned with strategy. And then we said, so we had the physical environment, but that wasn't enough. The technological environment was emerging as something you had to deal with. And then the cultural environment, right? So you have to, if you tell me, Jeff, I'm going to create a new business and that business is all about teamwork. And I say, okay, Tevis, I've just built you a $50 million office building that will enable teamwork to the utmost degree. But you don't pay people to be team players. You don't tell stories about teamwork. You don't give them technology that allows them to be team players. That building could be a waste of money. So we were trying to bring those three things together, right?
Gorgeous, love it.
So we started to the conscious capitalism thing. So we were in the consulting world. And in the consulting world, we started to really sort of see something going on. We had clients, like, we all do, coming to us saying, help me drop costs and raise revenue. Okay, got it, right? We all need some of that. But we had another set of clients who were coming to us and asking us questions about their relationships. How do I get my employees to give a damn about this place like I do? How do I get suppliers to feel like partners and not servants?
Yeah.
Partners bring me innovation. Servants only do what I pay them to do. How do I get communities to welcome me in and not put up barriers to entry, because barriers to entry are expensive? How do I get customers to understand I want to be in a relationship and not just in a transaction? Now, the punchline, as you and I have talked about in the past, I think, is if I want you to care about me, I should care about you first, right? So these companies were building what we now call these cultures of caring. And that's how we saw this happen. We saw it manifest itself in real time. And those companies were generally pretty successful.
Yeah.
Right? So we were looking at that going, that's interesting. Our clients that aren't focused on the bottom line are making more money. And they're making more money because their employees care more about them. Their suppliers help them and bring them innovations. Their communities, surround them and give them the benefit of the doubt. Their customers stay more, pay more, when things go wrong, and things always go wrong.
Always.
Just give them the benefit of the doubt. We were like, okay, this makes perfect sense. Why doesn't everybody do this? Again, we didn't, now by this time we're bringing in new people, and then people starting to say, well, that's not what you're taught in business school, Jeff. You taught customer shareholder value. And I'm like, but wait a minute. So we didn't know, we were just saying, okay, whatever, but we like those clients. And then we met Raj. And Raj Sisodia had been working on these ideas, and that's how we got involved with, we were giving him our experience on the ground as he was writing Firms of Endearment.
So the common thread in all these evolutions, because even if people don't know you, I sense that they can probably hear architect, football player, bartender, working in the hedge fund world, like that you have really been following your instinct all along. Like it seems like there's never been a grand, I gotta be this, right? There's right. So you haven't been confined by a vision, rather you've been guided by your truth. Is that fair?
It's a great way to put it. I hadn't thought about it that way, but it's a great way to think about it. In fact, oftentimes, I will sort of look back and, sort of think about and say, because everyone I went to architecture school with, they were all architects. They had the thing, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Now, even though I loved it, I never had that in my mind. I mean, I had it a little bit, but when something else came along that made sense to me, I'm like, well, that's interesting. So I think that's a really great way to put it, sort of guided by my truth in some ways.
Yeah. Or by your bliss.
Yeah.
Not to get all Joseph Campbell-y on everybody, but you've really allowed yourself to be guided by your bliss.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting. So each of these shifts, like, have they been scary? Has it been scary to turn down the job at Swanky, whatever? I just
Oh,
love that name. I'm sorry.
yeah, I know.
Was it scary?
So in the beginning, it wasn't that scary because I didn't know enough to be scared. Right? In the beginning, right?
Naivete again.
Yes. At 26, I was like, I didn't know enough to be scared. I was like, I was tending bar. I was making plenty of money. This kid says, "You want to design this restaurant for me?" I'm like, "Sure. Let me call Swanky and tell him I'll come after the end of the summer." And they said, "Okay." And then it just started to pick up speed.
Yeah.
People were like, "Oh, well, Jeff knows a business. Maybe we'll get him to design a place for us." So it started to pick up speed. It wasn't easy, but I didn't know to be scared, right? I was like, "Well, what happens if the whole thing craps out? So what?"
Well, that's a great, like, lesson in non-attachment to outcome,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Well, so
Know
why do
that.
you think some of us are so afraid of losing what we have that we can't move into what might be?
Yeah, it's a great question, which that I don't look. It's scary. It's scary, and this my path is not for everybody, and everyone shouldn't take it, right? Because it's not been easy. It's been difficult. I would venture to guess that if I had just said, "Well, I'm going to be that thing," which I'm certain I could have been, I'd be in a whole different place, financially and
I feel that way too. Yeah,
I,
my friends who stayed corporate have a really nice life, you know?
absolutely, right. So it's not easy. So and I don't want to give them an impression that it is, and it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
But I think that once I got started and I didn't have the fear in the beginning, then the fear was harder to manifest later on, even, right? Um,
Well, because you could think back to the fact that you had gotten through, like, you had empirical proof
yeah,
in your neurological firing that I can get through this.
right. Look, I should have been scared when we started the hedge fund.
Wow.
Right? I mean, by all accounts, I should have been terrified. And then there were points along that path. We started the research for the fund in '06 and launched the fund in '08. So I mean, think about that. We were on Wall. I moved back to New York, opened up a hedge fund with another guy who's never been on Wall Street. I was on Wall Street more than he was because I was a bike messenger in high school. So there was another guy. That was the only job I ever had on Wall Street. And we were in the middle of the financial crisis. I remember coming off the subway, coming out of the Helmsley building when they were taking the Bear Stearns sign down and thinking to myself, what have we gotten ourselves into?
Yeah.
But, we just said, the one thing about architecture and all the things we've done, and my partner Rick was great at this. He early on, when we sold the consulting company, 2006, and we started doing the research, we made enough money that we didn't have to really work for about 12 months. That's it. After that, we had to go back to work.
Yeah.
But during that 12 months, he said, what we got to do? We got to just take this whole time and learn. So we literally read for 12 months, right?
Wow.
And then, so even though we were in a position that it was pretty scary, we felt pretty prepared because the thing that we both share was this sort of intellectual curiosity, right? That we weren't going to really just sort of jump in without having any, we haven't any safety net, but at least we sort of had a feeling that we know how to build a plane, right?
So Jeff, part of why I'm having these conversations is I think that it's really easy to assign superhuman qualities to people who give themselves the kind of freedom to self-invent over and over and over again. And we tend to think of like a Richard Branson, or we think of like someone just on this mammoth scale. And what I really like about sharing your story is that you're really unpacking this innocence, right? You called it naivete, which is a kind of a pejorative word, so I'm going to call it innocence, right? This recorded knowledge in your brain that I've thrown it out of the wind before. I can get through this, right? And this sense of really following that inner navigation. I mean, that's something we can all do. Like, that's not, oh, but I'm not Oprah, or oh, but I'm not Russell Simmons, or whatever, right? Like, those are principles. So my next question is, do you have to do things to keep that sense alive in you? And do you know when you've violated it? When you've gone into fear-based thinking, when you've stopped following your bliss? Like, how do you know when you're off course?
Yeah, I think that, so it's a great question, Tevis. I think that one of the things that we always tell, so now we're in the venture capital space, and one of the things we always tell our entrepreneurs, because it's hard and you get overwhelmed, right? I think that's when I feel I'm going off path, when I feel so a sense of really sort of impending I'm getting overwhelmed with too much stuff. I feel that's when I'm going off track. And the thing that we've always done, I've always done, we did in all the businesses, and we train our entrepreneurs to do, is to get back on track and say, what's the next thing you have to do? What's the one next thing you have to do? This is the thing that I think gets people, because people look at a Richard Branson and they say, he did all of that stuff. I'm like, no, he didn't do all of that stuff. He did a million little things, right? So what's the one next thing I need to do to get, sort of get out of this sense of fear and tension and feeling overwhelmed, right? Because that's when you start to sort of, come inside of yourself and want to protect things, and you're trying to figure out how to do it all. If the thing you have to do is, if I have to send Tevis an email on the path to where I'm trying to get, but that's the really one thing, you do that one thing, right? So part of it is sort of being able to recognize your, sort of self-awareness. How am I feeling about this, and why am I feeling this way? Being able to sort of step out of that and saying, look, this is actually, I'm assigning all of these things to this situation that it doesn't really deserve. Because really all I have to do right now is send Tevis an email. That's really all I have to do. And if once that's done, I can go on to the next thing. Yeah. So I think some of it is that, and then, as an entrepreneur, I think that more to your question is, how do you know when you're not following, sort of your bliss? I think it's just when you feel like you're, that you're more focused on the end and not focused on the process itself, not focused on the journey, right? If you have this manic sort of feeling about, I have to get to there, and I still feel that all the time. I still get it all the time.
Well, you have to bring yourself out of it, right?
Yourself out of it. You have to bring yourself out of it. So I don't know. That sounds like, it feels like not a satisfying answer to the question, but
I don't know. Show of hands, was that unsatisfying? I mean, I think that's well, yeah. We got one hand up anyway, mine and Mark. Okay, there we go. Here's the thing, right? People say, well, our brain has been trained to expect 10 top tips, right? But what do we do when someone gives us advice in real life? We say, talk to the hand, right?
Right.
Because we have to find it on our own.
Yeah.
So what you just gave us, I far prefer a powerful question, right?
Yeah.
Like, something's not feeling right. What's really going on, right? And I think that there is a part of our psyche that wishes that Big Daddy in the sky would come down and just make everything great again. But that goes back to the superhero concept, right? That let's say that Superman did show up and fix everything for a minute. Well, then he would fly off, and kind of as Churchill said, we build our buildings and then they build us, right? We would go back to recreating a lot of the dysfunctions that already existed because we wouldn't be conscious, because we wouldn't be asking ourselves powerful questions, right? And so I feel like what you just offered up is exactly the truth.
Yeah, I think the questions is really that's the only thing that I keep going back to, is sort of asking yourself those powerful questions about, am I where am I doing what I want to do? Am I doing what feels right to me? And that's, I always believe this, in our guts, somewhere deep down inside, we always know the right thing to do.
We do. Oh, sometimes we do, and we just fight it.
It's hard to get to. It's hard to get to sometimes, but I think that 99% of the time, we know the right thing to do.
Yeah, we do. We do. Well, so I think you're awesome. And before I segue to let any of these folks ask you questions, Jeff got involved in something called the Laudato Si Challenge, which was sponsored by the Catholic Church under the coolest Pope ever, Pope Frankie Poo, I like to call him, because he's just so adorable and admirable, etc. And Jeff, you ended up receiving an award, or
yeah, crazy.
what exactly was that? Like, they flew you to Rome and everything? Did you get to meet him?
I have not met him, but I've every time that we're supposed to meet him, he's a busy world leader.
Oh no, really?
With other things to do than meet Jeff Cherry. But
he's missing out. I'm just telling you, he's missing out.
We have a great, there's a dear friend now, a man by the name of Cardinal Peter Turkson, who's sort of in charge of everything entrepreneurship for the Vatican. In fact, if anyone ever watched the movie The Two Popes.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, it's an interesting movie. I liked it, but Cardinal Turkson plays a pretty key role in the whole story of the two popes. And now he's one of Pope Francis's main lieutenants, but he's in charge of everything entrepreneurship. So he's been great to me. And the whole Laudato Si thing was essentially the Pope said, he wrote an encyclical in 2015, Laudato Si, care for our common home, just about, lots of how we're treating the planet, how we're treating each other, how business impacts all of this stuff. And a bunch of guys literally from Silicon Valley came together and said, we agree with this, and we want to try to figure out a way to operationalize it, not just have it to be inspiration, but how do we make some of these ideas come to life? And what they came up with was the run an accelerator for businesses that were solving some of the problems that Pope Francis cares about. Essentially, he said, the world's got a lot of problems, and government's been trying to solve them for a long time. They're just not very good at it. Church wants them solved, but we're not going to do it. We're an inspiration. These problems are going to be solved by entrepreneurs, so we should be supporting entrepreneurs who believe the same things about the world as we do. And that's sort of essentially what the Laudato Si Challenge, how it started. I was got connected with them through just sort of connections in the conscious capitalism world, and was asked to be a part of it because they asked us to invest because they were going to create an investment fund to invest in these companies, and I originally said no, because we said, look, tell us about what you're doing. And it's a pretty typical accelerator model. Bunch of Silicon Valley guys are going to Rome. And we said, well, look.
Happens every day.
Yeah, it happens all the time. We said, here's a problem with that. And our consulting practice, and Rick and I were talking to them, we said, look, we had worked with not-for-profits, not often, but every now and again, that were, no pun intended, doing the Lord's work, that were miserable places to be. Because the whole notion of conscious capitalism is not only about the impact you have on the world with your product or service, which is what they were focused on, but it's the impact on the world as being a human being. How are you going to show up? And I said, that's what we're really good at training entrepreneurs to think about. So if you're not doing that, we've got lots of reasons not to want to be involved. Not the least of it, the Catholic Church has enough problems, and if this blows up, we don't want to be a part of it. So they said, well, how would you fix that? And I said, well, we fix it by training your entrepreneurs in the same things that we train our entrepreneurs in: purpose, culture, leadership, stakeholder management. And to their credit, they said, okay, can you come to Rome and do that? So we did, and I've been working with them ever since. And the award was the Laudato Si Challenge Impact Award, which essentially was given to two individuals, to start, myself and a guy by the name of Ahmad Ashkar. Ahmad runs the Hult Prize, which is the largest student entrepreneurship competition in the world, and basically about for leaders who are trying to change the way we think about the practice of business.
Man, I just want to be your Sherpa. Can I do that?
Well, you and I have Sherpa'd around Rome.
Yeah, we have Sherpa'd a little bit. I think we're Sherping sushi for a bunch of rich guys, begging them for money commitments in somebody's penthouse somewhere. Anyway, that's a different story. So I just want to open it up. I don't know if anyone has questions for Jeff. I'm going to unmute everybody, I think, if I know how.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Marjorie.
Hi, Jeff. It's been really lovely to meet you and listen to you. And I missed the beginning, so sorry about that. But it just seems like you have such a great attitude and welcoming attitude and a zest for life. And I too have lived a life where it's been open and like, what's the worst that's going to happen? I was 27 years old and went and explored the world and came back. I'll get a job, no big deal, right? So it just sort of was a different attitude then. And I just wonder if you can, is there a particular memorable or meaningful learning moment for you in all of this that you take energy from often, or?
I think that there's probably a few, meeting Raj Sisodia, who wrote Forms of Endearment, and my friendship with him and another guy named Ed Freeman, who's a professor at the University of Virginia. Both of those guys have been really impactful on my life and the way I look at life. But also I think that the whole thing about the intellectual curiosity that really came from my old partner, Rick Frazier, in the hedge fund, who I've known since we were 18. But he's always been one of those people who was just very well studied. And I was really influenced by him and his ability to sort of not jump to conclusions, not go, rushing headlong too fast, because he was like, I want to understand, right? So it's that, I guess, and that's another architecture thing, right? Seek first to understand.
Yeah.
We can't do anything in architecture until we understand, right? I got to understand Marjorie and what she's trying to do, or how she wants to live, before I can put pencil to paper. So I think that's probably that whole seeking to understand first has been an important learning for me. And then meeting, being around people like Ed and Raj who have that same intellectual curiosity to nth degree.
Yeah. Awesome. Anybody else have a question? Janet, do you have anything you're curious about?
I don't really have a question. I just want to say, Jeff, it was really nice to meet you through this. And there's a number of things that kind of resonated with me when you talked about, focusing on the journey and getting unstuck and, kind of your personal experiences around that. Those really kind of resonated with me, kind of about where I am right now in my own journey and making sure I focus on what I'm really passionate about. And you do know, I think, inside when you're doing something that doesn't feel right, it just doesn't set right. And when you do something that you really are passionate about it or lives up to your purpose or who you want to be, it really is kind of an eye-opening way to live and to work and to feel. So thank you.
It really is. Thanks, Jen. I appreciate that. Tevis, I put, just FYI,
Yeah.
I put the link to that Medium article in the chat.
Yay, guys! Check that out because it's definitely worth having a look at.
Tevis, can I jump in quickly?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm not on mute because I'm actually driving, and so I can't seem to master that and driving at the same time. But I was curious, Jeffrey, to what your thought was about the role of education and how we change how we are preparing younger people to take on the challenges of the new capitalism.
Yeah.
That's a biggie.
That is a biggie. We're not doing a very good job of preparing young people for thinking differently about capitalism in many places. University of Virginia is different. Babson, where Raj is different. There are pockets in other places. I'm just talking about at the university level now. I don't know, at the at the elementary ed, and secondary ed level. I don't know that much about it, but I would imagine that we're not doing a very good job of that. And in some ways it doesn't, well, it does matter, but it's not going to matter as much as you'd think it would, because millennials and younger, they're way ahead of us. They get it. They are already on this. They don't, they want to work for their places that, that make them feel, that come alive. They're not, most of them are just not in it for a paycheck. So I think that I always feel optimistic when I'm talking to that generation, because they're already there. Now, they get pulled off the path a little bit if they go to Wharton or the University of Chicago, or, because those places, there are people in all those places that get it, but generally those places are run by the financing and economics folks who don't get it. So, I think we have to expand that. We're working a lot talking to, and I'm not just for, I'm not Catholic, although I went to Catholic University.
I was going to ask you that. Yeah. I'm
a Christian, but we have been working a lot with with the Catholic colleges, Catholic U and Notre Dame and St. John's and Villanova, talking to them about, look, this whole different way to think about the practice of business is so aligned with Catholic social doctrine that if you're in business school and you're not teaching about conscious capitalism, there's something out of joint there, out of line.
Yeah, there. Completely.
Maybe remove that.
Yeah, I studied theology, specifically socialistic theology, grassroots theology, liberation theology. Like, it goes by a lot of names. And what's interesting is if you trace back far enough in any of our wisdom traditions, it all goes back to community and multi-stakeholder, but you got to get pretty far back in some of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to get pretty far back. So guys, I want to thank you. I'm going to plug my book because I really want you to get it, because radical does not mean extreme. It means from your roots. And that's what Jeff has done his entire life, is he's navigated life from his truth. And not only with innocence, but also with a sense of trust. Trust that if he was really in it, that he would know how to navigate. Trust in himself, trust in life. And so it's coming out August 10th, and I'm really excited. And Jeff, do you have any parting words of wisdom to send us off into the sunny June day?
I would say first, thanks for having me, Tevis. It's always great to spend time with you. You're one of my favorite people.
Likewise.
Second, congratulations on the book. I can't wait to get it and read it. And third, it's just it's nice to be here with all of you, with Janet and Marjorie and Michelle, and hopefully other people will see this when you get it out recording. And you have my email address, Tevis. Happy to share it with anyone, with the rest of the people if they want to reach out. Yeah, happy to engage.
I will. Okay, guys, go shake things up.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.